Good morning. I couldn't get my cat out of the room this morning. I'm a moment late. So we're gonna do some more practical knowledge, and I thought we'd start with we covered how to sit in a chair, but I never did cover how to sit on the floor. So we're gonna talk about that, and then we're also gonna talk about the gaze, which is very elusive. And it's very experiential, but I will try to talk to you about some of those gaze points so at least you know what to look for. So when I sit, I use a lot of stuff. Lots of pillows, lots of things to hold me up. So I'm sitting cross-legged, and I'm using two pillows for my knees just because that's what I need. I know that when I meditate, my feet fall asleep. So I like to use an extra cushion for my feet because what you want ideally is that your hips are above your knees, right? That's what you're looking for. You're looking for an upright spine so that your low back is pulled in and you feel like you're being lifted upward, right? So if you're here, it might be comfortable, but this is where you want to be. And then you're going to bring your palms upright onto your lap. And I find that that's not the most comfortable thing for my shoulders. So I use a blanket to just give me a little shelf that I can work with. That way it doesn't feel like they're sliding off, and it helps open up the chest, open up the heart, right? But it doesn't feel strained, right? So all of these points again, knees are below the hips. Knees are below the hips. Palms are upright so that you get that external rotation, heart is open, and spine is long. All of those things together, right? All of the postural points are incredibly important. However, if you are focusing on your posture the entire time you're meditating, you're not doing meditation, you're doing yoga, you're doing asana, right? So we want to have this great uplifted spine, but if that's not what our spine looks like right now, then we don't want to try to force it, because then you're doing energetic work, you're muscularly engaging, you're trying really hard, and that's a yoga pose rather than meditation. So if you're a little slouchy, you try to, lift up the spine a little bit, but you'll find that especially as a beginner, if you're a beginner, that you're going to become very physically tired sitting in a nice postural way. So that's why we keep the meditations short. It's not just our mind, it's our body is trying to adjust to this. So the gaze is like an endless conversation, but we'll cover a few points. So what you want to do is take your thumb directly out and just lift it just a slightly bit. Yeah? Close your eyes and try to look at your thumbnail. Right? Remove your hand down. Keep that gaze at the same level. If it dropped, no big deal. Try to lift it back up. Nice. Now think about this. Your thumbnail was outside of you, right? So now I want you to imagine that it's right at your forehead. And then I want you to imagine that it's an inch behind your forehead. And then let that go. So, common things. 1, we go cross-eyed. 2, our head hurts because we're straining to have this focal point that doesn't seem natural. Okay, so I want to tell you the reason we do this, or one of the reasons that we do this, and my personal experience of this. That way you can get kind of the gist of it without having to focus on it and think that it's mandatory. So I want you to think about how you get through life, you're doing, right? We see, we do, we accomplish. There's a specific part of our brain that we use a lot to get things done, to progress, okay? And then visually, we use our eyes, right? We need that a lot. We're very visual. right? So I want you to think about those two things together. And you're taking your gaze and you're taking that part of the brain and you're just moving it slightly back. And I like to think of it as putting it on a shelf. So I'm not focusing my gaze as in I'm accomplishing something and that's what my brain needs to do, because that's the part of my brain that's always working, right? I'm actually taking my gaze and that part of my brain and putting it on a shelf, right? So that focus becomes, instead of an action, it becomes almost like a removal, right? You can think of it as a shelf, you can think of it as being held, but what you're doing is you're removing it from the equation. And that part of the brain, since it is always on, always doing, right? When you put it on a shelf, that's weird for your brain, right? That's when we start getting into a meditative mind, because we take that conscious mind, put it on a shelf, and we start noticing other things, right? We notice that we're still there, even though we put our conscious mind on a shelf, right? We notice that there is a different level of consciousness, right? We call it higher consciousness, or we call it super consciousness, and we'll talk more about that later. But that's the purpose for me. That is how I utilize the gaze, as being uplifted and at the third eye and slightly in. I use it as a tool to put my active brain, my view, right, on a shelf. That way that I can reach a different level of consciousness, right? So when you are focusing on trying to get that uplifted gaze and you find yourself hunkering down, trying to lift it up as high as you can, really focus, 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 I find that's not helpful, right? And I find that it's not really the point. So we take that and we practice it, right? You ready? Double inhale, double exhale. Inhale, double exhale, right? Tensing and releasing. Letting your body vibrate with vitality, feeling energized, perhaps feeling that energy moving up the spine. Last one. Right, closing your eyes, connecting with the breath, exhaling all the way, inhaling to a count of 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Right? Pause. You see, even the teacher makes mistakes, right? We're going to start again. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Immediate inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Continue on your own cycle of breath, right? Maybe the 4 count is too much, or maybe it's not enough, right? But you want an even breath. And we're going to call this our last round. And on your exhale, begin to bring the breath to a natural breath. Right? No breath control, just awareness, just mindfulness. watching the breath. And then take your awareness to your physical posture, right? Feeling that energy that lifts you up, that gives you rise, gives you length in the spine. But then also notice that energy that connects you down to the earth, that relaxes you. And imagine that there is a fine line. And that you could find this fine line not with control, right? That the fine line is such a little balancing point. There isn't a lot of energy that needs to be exerted to maintain it. And maybe you're already starting to naturally come into the mantra, right? Silently affirming. Or maybe we've practiced it enough that it's almost a backtrack now. Inhaling to hum and exhaling to sa. Right? Let's notice that gaze. Right? Slightly upturned, but relaxed. Notice that energy that we would call determination. That's that part of your brain that gets things done. And it's also the part of the brain we want to put on a shelf right now. Right? Pull that energy back. Put it on a shelf. Maybe you can imagine. Right? It's very tricky, that part of the brain. All of a sudden now, pulling it back is the action. That's the determination. So it's still there, still working. Right? It's our job to practice enough so that we can figure out how to actually release that energy, that work. To really put it on the shelf and notice that subtle awareness beyond. Perhaps layering in the finger movement can help you, just a little distraction. And always returning back to the mantra. right? That place where we put our active mind on pause, on a shelf, on rest, right? Those little brief seconds that we get there, they don't require as much breath. So if you notice that your breath pauses, it's not something you can do, but if it happens, enjoy it, right? Right, we're going to move to our expansion phase on your next inhale. Big full inhale. 3-part soft exhale. Remind yourself it's not the straining to do, right? It's the peace and release of being. Right behind that voice of determination, which we all need, is a sweet voice that says everything is already done. And here we just remember how to hear it. we'll go ahead and open our eyes and come back to the space. Right? That activity with the gaze and relaxing that part of your mind will be a huge part of your meditative experience, of your journey, right? And if you find that there's strain or tension, right? There it is, right? Something for you to work on, right? So thank you. Namaste.